In this video, I'm going to talk about old games and why you can have a lot of fun with them. One of the big reasons that I do have a tendency to like tabletop gaming over video gaming is because you almost never hear about a tabletop game getting its server shut down and you can't play it anymore. For the most part, when you're using pen and paper and books and all that kind of stuff, you can play games from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It doesn't matter. As long as you and your opponent are on the same page, using the same rules and having a good time with it, you can play games that are as old as there are words. That may have not technically made sense. The long and short is tabletop gaming is self-contained. You have the rules, you have the extra books, campaign books, modules, whatever, all that kind of stuff. You can keep playing those books for as long as you want. There are people out there that are still playing Dungeons & Dragons First Edition. There are people out there still playing the old Rogue Trader Games Workshop, 40K. As long as you have those books, there's nothing and there's nobody that can stop you. Now, I'm going to admit you can't go into your local shop and say, hey, are you interested in playing some games from 25 years ago? Because people might not have brought along their copies of games that have been out of print for 20 some years, admittedly. But if you bring, say, a game and you say, look, this is the game, I've got the rules, I'll teach you how to play it, I have two small forces. I've talked many times before about how you can, one of the big benefits of skirmish games is that you can get people to start playing because you can bring two small armies. If you have to play a big army game, not going to work out so well. But for a game like, RPGs, there's still plenty of people out there who are playing D&D First Edition, Second Edition, 3.5, all kinds of stuff because that's what they prefer. They don't like the new stuff. They want to play the old stuff. And that's what's great about tabletop gaming. But here's another thing, though, that's interesting is that sometimes a community grows up around a game that is getting older or is out of print or maybe even wasn't super popular to begin with, but they kind of take it and run with it and go their own direction. I recently came across a cool publication. It's just a magazine called 28. I found out about it online just recently. They put out their first issue. They're planning on putting out issues twice a year. It's a free kind of e-zine PDF thing that you download. It's like, I think 144 pages. And it really, really impressed me. It has some of the best looking layout, typography, art direction, photography that I've seen in anything wargaming related in quite some time. And it's made by a group of people all across the world who are putting it out for free. You might ask, well, what's 28 about? 28 is sort of about this game from Games Workshop back in 2001 or so. This game is called Inquisitor. And Inquisitor was a very small skirmish game, generally 3 to 5 models or less. And the trick is that the models were not 28 millimeter size, they were 54 millimeter size, which is twice, roughly, how tall we're used to using our normal miniatures. So they were big, the terrain needed to be big. This game frequently was suggested to be played with a game master. This has got some RPG going on in it, but it was very interesting. It wasn't generally points, there wasn't tournaments, that kind of stuff. It's a very interesting game that frankly was, I don't want to say kind of a failure, but kind of a failure from Games Workshop back in the early 2000s. But a bunch of people decided to kind of pick it up and run with it. 28 Magazine is about a different version, kind of this. Instead of playing with the 54 millimeter models that Games Workshop wanted you to play with in this game, they decided to start making 28 millimeter models, which is the standard size that we generally all play with today. And they modified the rules so that they would work with 28 millimeter. A lot of the artwork that's done in this book is by John Blanche. John Blanche was one of the early artists for Games Workshop and has spawned a lot of different cool conversions because he not only is a drawer but also a sculptor and has done really cool conversions for quite a while. A couple of years ago back in White Dwarf, they used to have this article called Blanchitsu, and that was showing a lot of either stuff that he had done or stuff that was inspired by him. And a lot of that type of look and feel has found itself into 28 Magazine. I was lucky enough to actually talk to some of the folks who were contributors to 28 Magazine at Adepticon this year, because they got together and had a huge battle. Well, huge in that there were, maybe a dozen of them, but it was on a big table. And it was very cool looking. There were really interesting, all homemade for the most part, vehicles and a lot of heavily converted models and a lot of really interesting, cool stuff to look at. And this is a thing that they evidently do all over the world. A group of people who kind of live in the middle of America can get together at Adepticon, some people from further away, and play. And then people who live over in Europe, they get together, let's say in Helsinki, and get together and have a game. So this is not something, again, that you go into your local game store and say, hey, let's sit down and play some, Inquisitor 28. I'm sure you've brought your models along, and then you just get like a crazy look from the people that are there at the shop. This is something that there's a big a good-sized online community for. Again, all of this is incredibly niche, which is within our incredibly niche market, which is within tabletop gaming, which is getting bigger. But this is all a community of folks who are really interested in making this game much, much, much more about the narrative in this situation and much less about the competition. They really get into the sculpting and the modeling and all that kind of stuff and the terrain and everything to play games that they really enjoy in this style of this old game from 2001. Now, I'm lucky to own this book. As it turns out, a local-ish shop to me had a copy sitting on their shelf literally since 2002 or 2003 that I just picked up at face value. Otherwise, you got to go onto eBay and places like that and look for it. I think there's PDFs you can sometimes find online as well, because this book is well out of print, and there is a living rulebook version online that I've come across in a couple of places. But a lot of different people play it in a lot of different ways. A lot of people like to take this kind of overall idea and then kind of wedge it into Necromunda, which they call Inquisimunda. But then there's Inc 28, which is INQ 28, which is kind of like a version of this. But it's different people all kind of coming together on an aesthetic and an idea that they really enjoy, and getting together and playing these games, talking online, going through all this stuff, sculpting, coming up with their own lore, coming up with all their own interests. And as I've kind of dug more into this over the last couple of weeks since Adepticon and since the magazine came out, and dug through the magazine, which you should totally, I'm going to link to it in the description below. You should totally check it out because it is amazing. The thing that's really struck me is that this type of thing is very difficult to do, in my opinion, in video gaming. I am not poo-pooing video gaming in any way here. I know there's tons of cosplayers out there who can do tons of stuff. There's tons of fanfic and things like that out there that have to do with video game. And also, frankly, there are people out there who have decided to make their own servers so that they can run old games and things like that. And I get that. That's very cool as well. But I think it's, for most people, a bit easier to do it with tabletop gaming than it is to do with video gaming. I've had plenty of video games that just don't run anymore. Like either the machines are all now way more too powerful and the software's too old, or the server doesn't work anymore, so you can't hook up anymore, that kind of stuff. But I've got a growing collection of older games that I enjoy. And sometimes it's just because you want to go through and you want to read like this stuff. I've also got the 2002 annual for this as well. And there's tons of just amazing artwork and amazing stories and things like that. And they're just beyond the normal gaming content. That's the thing that I find tabletop gaming is very interesting about, is that you can get these niches of people who nowadays, because of this amazing internet, can get together and really start to talk and go together and these things. The problem, of course, is that it's very difficult for them to get together and play, which is one of the big reasons why big conventions like Adepticon and others are really cool, because they give a destination to a lot of these folks so that they can come together and actually meet face-to-face for the first time and then play these games that they really enjoy. So I'm just telling you, maybe look back at some of the old games that you really enjoyed that are out of print now, and do some research online. See if there's some people out there who are maybe trying to keep that game alive in some fashion, and maybe changing things that they kind of wish that the game had originally had, or whatever, being creative with their gaming. And if you've got some sort of game like that out there, if there's somebody out there who's doing something really interesting, and leave it in the comment below and check that out. And again, I can't stress this enough. You hit the link and go check out 28 Magazine, because if you're anything like me, I think it's awesome. It's really cool.